join us up here on stage. Paul Page and Tom Beeler.
That was good. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Scott Goodyear for the great warm-up.
Wait a minute. I want to run corrections on what he
Please.
just said. Guy's unbelievable. Thank you, Scott.
I've been told you have to kind of watch Scott because once it starts to roll, he can keep rolling.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
This is actually a huge opportunity for me because I've been blessed. I covered IndyCar racing, particularly at Indianapolis, for 27 years, and Larry and Pam had joined me for about 12 or 15 of those. And in the process, I met a lot of very talented people, either calling the race or driving it and building it. So the opportunity to talk to Paul Page, who had been one of those icons for me, is a great, great pleasure. Paul, thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to start off. Paul has written a book, which I'll share with you information on through the course of this. But it starts with a Johnny Rutherford quote that I think in some way relates to what happened in your life. Johnny said, "Luck is where opportunity meets preparation." And you had a lot of opportunity that happened, but it wouldn't have gotten there but for where you had gone. So I want to take this back. Paul Page, 1945, Evansville, Indiana. Give me a little bit of background on how you got started.
Well, we left Evansville pretty quickly. My mom was married. My stepdad was a military officer, Army officer. And so we were a typical mill family, traveled the world. In 1948, we ended up in Stuttgart, Germany, which is where I got my first taste of any kind of really high-performance cars. And I got to see a Formula One event. But now we're in the era of Fangio and Moss and all that, So because we didn't leave for like 6 or 7 years. So later we were stationed at Fort Sheridan, Illinois, up on the North Shore. And my parents said, your uncle wants you to come down to Indianapolis and see the Indianapolis 500. And I'm like, I'm a Formula One guy. I'm Formula One, And I don't want to see a bunch of guys just make left-hand turns. That's ridiculous. You're going. So I did, and the race hadn't even started, and I was totally in love with it. The ceremonies, the tradition, just everything about it. I was sitting up in the first turn, so pretty good seats, and that was 1960. And on that day, I said, I'm going to be part of this. I don't know what it's going to be, and be a parts washer, driver, I don't know, but I'm going to be a part of the Indianapolis 500. And one thing led to another, and I had some skill in broadcasting, and went away to the Army, came back to Indianapolis, Indiana, and started looking for jobs in broadcasting. And I went to work for one station, WTLC, who was up on the top of the Dearborn Hotel, kind of an interesting drive to work. And I was there doing classical music and jazz music. I was a disc jockey. It's cool. And the jazz part of it, which was in the evening at 8:05, they called the Jazz Flight 8:05. And I really got into jazz, and so they closed. They sold the station. And I said, okay, that's cool. I go find another station, WATI, and I get a job there. And I'm there 2 weeks. And they automated the station. So I don't think people are going along with my broadcast career. So I went to WIBC and I said, hey, do you got anything? And they had something in the news department. Mm-hmm. And that was it.
See, WIBC was the 50,000 watt voice of Central Indiana.
Right, exactly.
And was still the call letters are significant for being a great news station. So I'm sure arriving there when you did was a great opportunity.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about electronic journalism. I really didn't. But Sid Collins, my mentor, my best friend, was there, and at first he just kind of kept pushing me away. In fact, one day I was sent out by the station to cover the Soapbox Derby Championship, the Wilbur Shaw Memorial Hill. And I went out and I interviewed the winner, and I was so proud of that interview, and I put it on the radio and sent it back to the station, and they put it on the air, and I went back to the station, and I'm, feeling like I just did a big deal interview. And I walk in the building, and Sid Collins is standing there. I assume you all know who Sid Collins was, the guy that originated the radio network and the voice of the 500. And he was standing in the hallway, just looking. And I walked up, and I wasn't sure, was it he showed approval or what it was. And he looked at me and said, "Paul, that is the worst interview I have ever heard." So now my career is gone. I better go back to that parts washer concept. But what he did was that day, he started to teach me how to do the job I'm doing now. And he was constantly at it. He'd take me back in one of the big quiet studios at 2835 North Illinois, and we'd talk about interview. And then we'd talk about, if you had this situation in a race, how would you handle it? How do you do this? How do you do that? And so by the time it came for me to take over from Sid, I'd been through a doctorate in broadcasting, and I can't tell you how many things he taught me that helped me out in my career.
I know one of the things that I've heard, I've talked to Bob Jenkins before he passed many times about his time on the air and stories he had heard, and Howdy Bell and many of the other guys who were on the network. And one of the things they would mention about Sid is Sid would teach you a lot about the descriptives that you're using. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying the bright red car of so-and-so, the scarlet red car, the choice of words. He sounds like he embodied an awful lot of the let's paint this word picture for you.
Yes, he comes out of a different era of broadcasting. And that era understood that, and Sid certainly understood, you need to take the listener and put them there. And the only way you do that is by describing things vividly and looking for the small thing and describing, the fact that the engines have just started and the exhaust fumes are wafting over you, just, things like that. And he created this whole genre of broadcasting. And I got to tell you, when he started the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network in 1952, it was not possible to do. It literally wasn't. Having a national and then ultimately a global network a couple years later, we didn't have satellites or anything in those days. That is to say, if we wanted to put another station on the network, we had to call AT&T long lines, then they had to put their technicians on it, and every station was routed directly. There's no satellite. Satellite today, it's nothing. You plug in the bird and off you go. But also, there weren't sufficient either talent nor engineers in the city at that time to do a broadcast of that size, the way Sid had conceived it. So he was a great salesman, and he went to other stations in the market and said, "I want to do this, but I think all of us ought to do it together." And so he got talent from each of the different key stations. He got engineering people from it, and lo and behold, he got it done. And I don't know how he really did it, but that was Sid.
Oh, he established an incredible team of news people that I knew, sports people from television stations and radio stations. Chuck Marlowe from WTTV and Charlie Brockman from what was is now WTHR. There was such a neat application of that is for every race you're hearing voices, no matter who you listen to, that would assemble this. Now, we fast forward a little bit. 1974, I believe it is. Sid talks to you about joining the team.
Yeah, he brought Jerry Baker and I in, and we had both been told, there's no room. You guys aren't, essentially, you guys aren't good enough. And so he called us in one day, and we had no idea what it was. We certainly didn't think it had to do anything with the race. And calls me in first. He sits me down, and little, formality back and forth. And he said, "Well, after the 73 race, we extended the pits, and I think there's another pit position, and I think that's for you." And then he brought Bake in and put him in turn one. And Bake and I we were so cool. I mean, we're not excited about that now. And we both hit the parking lot, and it was like, woo!
Now, was the pits a good assignment?
No, my God, it's dangerous down there. You see these crazy race drivers?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they bounce off all kinds of crap down there. You got to remember, I had the north pits, which was referred to at the time as the garbage pits because that was all the back end of the field up there. And so the good thing about that is those guys would fall out, and I'd get some of the first interviews to talk about. But those were also the days before we had pit speed limits. Mm-hmm. So here comes Bobby Unser at 160 miles an hour past you, and it's like, and that couple of first pit stops, I said, I need to work for somewhere else. One of the corners might be a little better. I got stuck in the pits the next year, not stuck, because obviously I loved it. And I wore, Sid said you always had to be a little flamboyant. Yeah. You had to be in a position where you called attention to yourself. And so I wore a white suit for the pits.
Bold move.
Oh, boy, you talk about stupid. But then at the same time he hired me, Sid started grooming me for that job.
Yeah.
And the intent originally was that in the 1977 race, he would start the race, we'd hand off at the middle of the race, and I would finish the race. Unfortunately, Sid passed away that month, and we didn't have that opportunity, and that's been sad for me all along.
But Sid had specifically requested you take over.
Oh,
That's what strikes me.
He had, in fact, a couple days, maybe a week or two before the start of the month of May, he had called Tony Holman and a couple of other people, but specifically Tony, and said, we've got Paul trained for this. We want Paul to do that. Now, having said that, it's now 1977. It's a countdown to the race, and it's like within the last minute of the countdown. And to show you the wonderful confidence that my people had in me, my producer, Jack Morrow, who stood right here alongside my shoulder, with maybe 30 seconds to go, reached over and said, Paul. And he took my hand and he shook it. And he said, Paul, there are 13 million listeners out there. Don't screw this up. Just what I needed.
Yeah. So we'll set it up. 1977, for those of you who may not remember, this was actually a historically pivotal year. Mm-hmm. Janet Guthrie became the first woman to race in the Indianapolis 500. In practice, Tom Sneva had broken the 200-mile-an-hour record for the first time. So it is a really significant point. We discover after the race, it's also Tony Holman's last race as owner of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, having passed later that year. Can we go ahead and play the audio on the first clip, please?
The crowd on its feet as A.J. Foyt, they're waving at him, waving him on through turn number 3, off of 3 into the short chute. Here's Jim Shelton. Hey, the crowd is up there cheering, as you can hear in the background. Not only the eyes of Texas, but the eyes of the world are on this great man. And now to call the checkered flag, our chief announcer, who did call a great race today, Paul Page. A.J. Foyt down the main straightaway. The checkered flag is out. A.J.'s hand in the air. He is the winner. A.J. Foyt at Indianapolis has won his 4th 500-mile race. A.J.
See, this is what gets me. You get thrown your first race, not expecting that you're going to have to carry it yourself, and you get A.J. Foyt's 4th win.
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, it worked out. At that time, the winners section, Victory Lane was where I started when it was down at the south end of the pits, and I was a kid sitting up there, and I could see the winner there, but now they were pulling him right in front of the control tower. And AJ climbed up on the back of the car, and he's acknowledging the crowd. And by the way, if you look at some of the photographs of almost any year in that era, you'll see a guy, a bald-headed guy, holding a microphone. And it doesn't have a microphone flag on it, so you're not sure who he's working for. And I kept wondering who this guy was, because I thought I knew all the broadcasters, and found out he was getting in the winner's circle at the Speedway and had done for years on a Movietone News pass. Movietone News hadn't existed for years, and if you look carefully at the picture, you can see the wire doesn't go anywhere. It's laying on the ground. So AJ pulls in there, and he pulls off those black leather gloves, and he's looking up at the crowd and acknowledging the whole thing, and they're getting the wreath, and they put that on him, and he's standing up in the cockpit now, and he pulls those gloves totally off, and he looks up. He takes the gloves, and he throws them. I thought, wow, A.J. Foyt just threw his gloves at me. Then I realized all of the queens and the princesses are on the next level down. So
Never the fool.
some you win, some you lose.
Now, during your tenure, you were on as the voice of the radio network from 1977 to 1987.
That's correct.
And in that tenure, you had also a lot of historically significant races. Clearly, the 1982 race, the close finish between Gordon Johncock and Rick Mears was one, up to that point, the race for the ages.
Well, I think that was one of the best radio broadcasts of the 500. I believe that to this day. The broadcast of the 500, it's a team. You have to work together. I mean, it's so integrated. And now with laps so quick, you're handing. We used to have turn 1, turn 2, middle of the backstretch, turn 3, turn 4. Well, the middle of the backstretch guy would get in like 8 seconds. You know, here they come, there they go, thank you. So we had to pare down, and we had to, over the years, decide how we were going to be able to present that broadcast. In 82, with, I want to say 13, 14 laps to go, I had one of the brand new little digital stopwatches, so I was cool, you know. But I'm using it, I'm timing, and I'm looking at that first second interval, and I realize Rick Mears is gaining about a second a lap on Gordon Johncock. And if we calculate that, then the two are going to be side by side at the white flag. So I get on my talkback system to all the announcers, and I say, here's the situation. Watch Mears, he's closing. We're staying with this. This is going to be the story. And so we did. And we're pumping the audience, and we're pushing them, and we're pushing them. And when they started that last lap, they were side by side. And I could tell where the cars were on the track from the fifth story of the control tower. I could tell where they were by the sound. I could hear the crowd in this big quadraphonic sound rotation. And of course, the crowd was going nuts. Our announcers were going crazy, and it was an awesome finish. Now, if you go over to my other business of television, and that particular year, television sucked. They decided that the best thing to do on that last lap was, as the two headed into turn 1, excuse me, they needed a shot of Rick's wife.
Of course.
Covered up the exact moment that everything that mattered in that lap happened. So when I got to ABC, we held some conversations about just that kind of thing. And
I should probably add it was Rick's first wife, so
nice.
I had to go there. Also, one of the things that I've often wondered about is rain delays. You covered the 86 race.
What fun they are.
So fill me in.
Well, if it works right, and you know, it's kind of like a regular rain delay, even if it goes for several hours, you really rely on your pit reporters, because they're out, they're going to generate stories, they're going to do interviews for you, and you in the booth, generally speaking, in the booth, you're kind of a traffic cop of the whole thing, somewhat augmented by whatever idiot is in the truck from New York that decides he knows all about it, even though he rides in a yellow cab. And so that's very cool.
Yeah.
And that's very helpful. But even then, now you have played all of the features that you put together and intended for the race, and you've interviewed everybody, including guys I don't think the pit guys even knew. You know, it's like, here's my buddy. What's your name? And those are fun to a point.
Yeah.
But then when you run out of stuff, now you're not serving the audience well. And the best thing a network can do at that point is get away from that. But Indy being so big, the network was hesitant in a number of cases to move away from the race under the possibility of they lose the audience, and the audience doesn't necessarily come back for the end of it. So you got a lot of balls in the air there to try and keep them. But in 86, there's no helping. In fact, at one point on the second day, the truck called me and said, look, we don't want to keep you up in the booth the whole time, so you got to do a bunch of throws for us to use during these other programs. So I'm saying, you know, the rain has stopped, the race is about to begin. It's still racing, pouring here at Indianapolis. We don't know when the race will begin. I did like 20 of those. And then I could go downstairs and they drop those in to, at least we weren't trapped in the booth for that whole thing. But they're hideous. They're really tough to do.
Now, one of the races that there was the last race that you called as Voice of the Radio Network in '87 was also significant, as it was Al Unser Sr.'s fourth win. So you got a chance to call two of the 4-4 winners.
Excuse me, I won't call four of them.
Three of them, all four.
Four of them.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You have
Yeah.
called Elio as
Come
well.
on, get the facts right. This
you
is
know.
important stuff. Wow.
Read the book. I think one of the things that's really significant about that particular one, not only is that it was your last, but based on the way that the closes that race happened, is Roberto Guerrero has stalled in the pits. They can't get the car running. Al Unser is catching up, and Al did not have a ride at the beginning of that month.
That was a show car.
It was in
That
a
was in
hotel
Reading,
lobby or
Pennsylvania,
something.
at the Penske headquarters.
Yeah.
And Danny Ungaius was supposed to drive something, and that didn't work out. And then up came Al, so they said, well, bring that car here, maybe we can put Al in it. That's what they did, and there he was. I mean, that guy's a sandbagger. I'll tell you what, he drives so smooth. And I didn't really figure what was going to happen until right in those last laps where Guerrero had his problem in the pits and everything, and all of a sudden it dawns on me, Al Unser can win this. He can be a four-time winner. You know, so, wow. But yeah, I got to call all of them. And my favorite now, and has been for a long time because he's a good friend, is Elio.
Yeah.
And I thought that finish I thought that whole race last year, but that finish was like unbelievable. And of course, if you saw it, Elio decided he was going to like do a lap or two of the track on foot. It seemed like actually security was like, get him off the track. We got to get him up here before television runs out. We got to give him the trophy and all that. Go get him.
So, okay, 1987, the radio network opportunity was there, but you chose to move on to NBC Sports.
I
Tell
was
me.
actually ABC. In 77 or 87?
87.
Yeah, 87. I'd been working with NBC Sports since 79. And they had the kart races. And so NBC offered me that. And the good thing about it was it never would therefore conflict with the Indianapolis 500, so I could do it, and I had a lot of fun doing it. But then ABC went live. They had two just disastrous years. They were using, and I don't mean this to be demeaning, they were using their stick and ball guys. And guys who, do football and baseball, they're great announcers, but racing is so entirely different. You have so many different stories intertwining at once, and I'm one of those guys that was trained to tell stories. I'm trying to mix in I just don't want to read whatever the graphic is saying. If they put a graphic up, and Scott knows this and has done it, you tell them why that's important. Not, it's 75 over 72, that's good. No, it's that you have to tell the stories. And then you have to tell the stories that link the audience to the driver. And that's really part of what you do early on in a race like the 500, where you pick up so much audience that is not normally a race audience, is you try to convince them through stories to pick somebody. This guy is interesting, and then stay with them. Now, not to criticize today, life moves on, but I kind of miss the storytelling. I really enjoyed doing that, and I think we did well by our audience.
Well, you had some great challenges during that NBC era, too, because you were not only doing the IndyCar side, but you were also doing NASCAR, some Formula One, but also things like not only America's Cup, the sailing, but also the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. I'm told you excelled at that.
That's not.
Joey
Where'd you get
Chestnut,
that? That's not
I
right.
think it was chapter 6, Joey Chestnut.
Well, there's, that guy lives right here, Joey Chestnut, who is the big guy at the at the Nathan's Hot Dog
The
Eating
hot dog
Contest.
giant, yeah.
I did it for 13 years, and it was a free trip to New York. Early enough, we always had to come in early, union deals. So that's 3 nights on Broadway, and then show up the morning of the event and say, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to watch people eat. Okay. And you do the show, it's live, and you leave.
Yeah.
And those are the best shows.
Yeah.
1 hour show, goodbye, see ya.
Now, you'd also done NHRA. Was this more of a challenge for you? Obviously, you've got a short straight line pass.
Yeah, I always loved drag racing. I loved it since Raceway Park first opened, you know, as a kid. And I still have a T-shirt that almost fits me. No, it doesn't even come close. That is the 25th anniversary of the NHRA Nationals. So I always really enjoyed drag racing. And they're really neat people. One of the best things about the drag racers is they don't have gigantic sponsors. Mm-hmm. And they don't have engineers. You know, all of the settings for those cars are not on computer, they're on timers. Mm-hmm. Big box in the front, got a timer, the guy sets it, and the key guys walk around with their little book. They know what happened in this temperature at this track and this year, and they do the settings from that. So it's not like you're getting a lot of engineering debriefing. The end result of all that is the drivers are there and they're accessible and they're having fun and they have their families, and when they finish their runs, they're kind of done for the day. And over in the coach compound, they get out the grills and start barbecuing, and we'd go over there at the end of the day and join them. It was fun. It was fun.
So we get into 1987, and the ABC opportunity comes at the end of the year that you'll be calling the 88 race.
Right.
And so the old team, Jim McKay and Jackie Stewart, and mm-hmm. it's a changing era. 88 right. being a big race, 3 Penske cars on the front row. Mm-hmm. And could we go ahead and play the second clip, please? Yeah, number 4.
Today, it's the 72nd running of the Indianapolis 500-mile race. Well, a giant crowd has assembled at the 2.5-mile oval that is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and by race time itself, it's expected that nearly 500,000 people will fill these giant grandstands in the world's largest stadium. Absolutely packed today, all here with the same thought in mind, to watch the 72nd running of the Indianapolis 500. The cars already in position on the straightaway.
I didn't have stage fright.
Standing in pit lane, he's ready to go as all the mayhem is handling around him. How do you prepare for that, knowing this is your first time in front of the camera on your first global broadcast?
The good news is you get so busy that you can kind of shut that out, mm-hmm. especially once you hit the air. Now, the times that were always tough for me was standing there waiting to go on the air, especially when we opened in the pits, and you get this little crowd around you, you know, and they're looking, and I'm used to looking at a camera. This crowds, that's a whole different thing. And you wonder what they're thinking, and, you know, and what am I going to say? And so that one was scary. That one was really scary. I did have pretty good stage fright there, and I don't normally get stage fright anymore, except deals like this, of course. Massive audience.
As you can tell.
Yeah.
I think it's clip 2. Could you play that as well, too, please? Yeah. One of the things that was key to this, there was a film that came out in the late 70s, or late 80s, called Delta Force. And Paul has a good story about this because there was always an open that used this as the underscore that was to set that pulse, that tempo for the show, the broadcast. And inevitably it would fall to Paul to write the open as this video montage was assembled. Go ahead and explain how this happens.
Well, what we actually call that is a tease. Its purpose is to really come on strong. So if somebody's dialing across other stations, maybe you've done something that grabs them. So we call it the tease. And I worked at that time with a guy named Don Ohlmeyer, who I also worked with at NBC, who, to my way of thinking, is greatest auto racing producer and director ever. And he loved auto racing so much that he had gone to work for NBC and was actually the president of NBC, but he'd still come to the Indy 500 to direct it. And so his theory was that the best way to grab the opening is to take like your 300 best shots and putting together in some mix and use that music. We both said that message, because the music, it softens, then it flares and everything. So the way we actually did it is Don would go into the trucks on Tuesday of race week, and he'd work on it all night and the next day, and then on Wednesday evening, he would come to me and he'd have what he's set up, which is just video and music. And then he hands it to me, and I have to write a script that complements that video, which was challenging, but a lot of fun to do. And then on Saturday morning, when we had the entire, like 80 ABC people together for a production meeting, that's how we'd lead it off. We'd play that. Now, the interesting thing about that is, if you go on YouTube, you can search the Indy Delta Force opens, there's a Paul Page opens, a couple of things like that. After I stopped doing it, after I was no longer there to do it, people continued it on. Every year, to this year, you'll find somebody who will make a copy of that in some form and put his own narration to it. And so I got a cult going, huh?
Now, before we cut to a break, I actually want to get rolling with a great opportunity that we can pick up on after we come back after intermission. But Sam Posey and Bobby Unser. Sam had been a sports car guy, and Bobby had been a little bit of everything guy, and they joined you in the booth. Now, everybody remembers when Howard Cosell was in the ABC Monday Night Football booth with Don Meredith, and it was one of those things where when Frank Gifford's calling it, you've got all these personalities, and you had the same problems. Can you give us a little bit of the Bobby and Sam story?
Two wonderful men.
Is that going to show on video?
You've got Sam, who was sitting to my left. He's an aristocrat. He's an architect by training. He also paints. He also writes. He has a book out called The Mudge Pond Express. It's one of his first books he wrote. So you got kind of an intellect sitting here. And then you got Bobby Unser. What can you say about Bobby Unser? Well, I can tell you one thing. He is the most intellectually honest person I've ever met. That is, and I know intellectual and Bobby in the same sentence is an issue, but if Bobby didn't understand something, he would badger the person until he did understand it. I mean, he was always at it. Now, Bobby was crazy, unique, enjoyable, fun, one of my best friends. The things that we did together, off of racing first. Bobby always could approach people. He was always affluent. He's, hi, I'm Bobby, and people would react to that. So one day we were in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're driving along the Camelback Mountain. And I'm driving the car because Bobby is not allowed to drive rental cars for various reasons that involve swimming pools.
Some of them are in the book.
So we're driving along, and Bobby is looking up at the Camelback, and he says, wow, look at those homes. Those are beautiful. Yeah, Bobby, they really are. This is a pretty rich area up here. Let's go up there. Well, Bobby, I think that's gated. No, turn right here. So I turn. I'm following his directions. We're going up the Camelback now. And we get up to a house. It's a gorgeous, big circular drive, huge house. And Bobby says, turn in right there. Okay. They're going to call the police, but okay. And I pull up. Bobby jumps out of the car. He goes to the front door and knocks on the front door. The woman of the house answers. Now I know we're going to jail. Bobby says, hi, I'm Bobby Unser, 3-time winner of the Indianapolis 500 and the fastest man alive. I'd like to see your house. Sure, come in, Mr. Unser. You got to be kidding me. She doesn't know him from the man in the moon. Bobby did funny. His business card said Bobby Unser, VIP. On his briefcase, in large white letters, it said Bobby Unser, VIP. He wanted to make sure you knew who he was. In broadcasting, he was a treat. Scott was reminding me earlier about at Long Beach one year. Now, Bobby Unser is the 13-time winner of the Pikes Peak Hill Climb, So, and we didn't have great facilities at Long Beach, and our booth this particular year was a scissors lift, 75-foot scissors lift that was right at the edge of the course at the pit entrance. So race time, Bobby hadn't been in it until race time. He never showed up until race time anyway. We never knew where he was. So we get in there, and I know full well how he feels about height.
Yeah.
So I start to crank it up. We go up, and he called me Father all the time. Father, now that's enough, Father. No, Bobby, we got to get higher. We can't see over this. No. I got him up 75 feet. He's paralyzed, and then I start rocking. And it was, Father, stop that! Now, another thing that he had, and the good thing is Scott never did this. I always was impressed right from the beginning with how Scott studied broadcasting and how he turned out, because he turned out,
He's okay.
no, he turned out great.
Yeah.
But Bobby, he didn't like to ad-lib his opening on camera. And you really have to do that. You really have to, on your on-cameras, as I've told Scott, you got to be in a position that if something happens while you're in that opening and you're on camera and the producer says, this has just happened, then you got to be able to swing to it. Now, if you're caught in a script, you can't do that. And we never had teleprompters or anything like that. But Bobby built his own teleprompter, and it was some file folders taped all together, and then he'd written his open on them. And I told him like 4 or 5 times, stop it. Dude, that's going to catch you. No, I'm good, Father. I'm good. It's okay. So we were at Michigan one year on the top of the grandstand, which is something like 12 stories in the air. He's already in trouble because it is 12 stories in the air, and the wind's kind of blowing across it. So I worked this deal out with the stage manager. And with about 3 minutes to go till we're on the air, Bobby, who never paid attention to that either, he didn't pay much attention to anything except Bobby, but at that particular occasion, I grab him and I say, Bobby, we're on, come on, get in place, here we are, here we go. Hi everybody, it's Paul Page, we're here at Michigan Speedway for the 500, and Bobby Unser is here, and if a man knows the 500, it's Bobby. Bobby? So Bobby starts reading this thing. One of the problems with it too is he's looking off camera. So at my nod, the stage manager who is holding this up lets go of it. And the wind takes it. And Bobby's like, now that wasn't live. We're going to be live in about a minute, and I hope you learned your lesson. Now, Sam Posey, the thing in the booth with Bobby and Sam is, if Sammy said it was black, then Bobby was going to say it was white. And if Sammy made a technical point, Bobby would immediately say, Sam, you're dead wrong. And then Bobby would respond by talking his way around in a loop and finally getting back to say exactly what Sam had said, except now Bobby said it and therefore it was fact. Now Sam used a crutch too. By the way, one year the Jackaroot, our pit guy, got me a referee shirt to be able to sit in between them. But Sam would write all these really eloquent notes of things that he was wanting to say in the broadcast. And he'd have a stack of 5x7 cards, I swear it was that thick. And a couple years, I did the same thing as I did with Bobby. I said, Sam, you're going all the time looking at those cards. You're not looking at the race. You're not getting the feel for the race. You're just trying to figure out when you're going to read something. Well, I like doing it this way. Well, I don't. So please don't use those cards. Next year, he shows up again with the cards. So now we start on the air. Hi, everybody, you know, and all that. We're now in the booth, you know, da-da-da-da-da. I reach over, pick up his cards, and I throw them across the booth. Same kind of reaction as Bobby, but he was also much better that day. But working in between those two was, they were nuts.
A lot of people say it's the golden era of
Oh, it was
IndyCar
fun.
broadcast.
It was so fun. Yeah.
This is a good time for everybody to take a pit stop and get up, stretch your legs.
Get your questions ready. I got
And
answers.
we'll come back, and you'll be able to talk to Paul, and maybe hear Scott and Paul do some old storytelling.
Oh,
and
yeah, we
see
can
what we
do
can
that.
do. So feel free. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Okay.
Yeah.
We coming back. I really want to talk about my race driving.
Yes, I do. Because
Are you all Porsche people? Okay. I apologize. I'm not. My car is a Ferrari Mondial, but I bring it up, one, to brag, and and two, to say that Sonex is the only thing that goes on that car. And it makes it look so much better. So thank you again for that, and thanks for being involved. And you didn't ask me at all about my incredible racing career.
yes, this I think we're going to lead into the questions with understanding that this man doesn't just call races, he races, but there's some background on this. Paul, fill us in.
Important stuff here.
Bring it.
First of all, I'm the man who created the Page theorem of motorsports, and that is that the brakes are ineffective when the car is upside down. I proved it. I started racing in '69 in a Fiat 124 Spider, and promptly spun the bearings up on that and just like ruined that engine. So I started Formula Fords with a Lotus 51, and then moved on in time to drive an Eldon Mark 10C, which I drove until 1977. I'd like to tell you that I won something, but that would be a lie. I had some great second places, so I guess I'm emulating Scott down there. Don't let the door hit you, you know? But other racing, like I've twice driven the Baja 1000, which is a hoot. I've had so much fun, especially when you're going along what they call a goat trail, which is slightly more narrow than the car is. I mean, you really have one of the tires hanging over, and it's about a quarter of a mile, and you know you're looking down there, and I'm going to die. So I've done that, and I've driven some 24-hour races, specifically over at Mid-Ohio. But I think my absolute favorite moment in a race car was I got to go when Porsche had their Indy car. They invited me to come over to Weissach and see their new rolling road tunnel, but more importantly, to go to the Nürburgring and drive the Porsche Indy car. And it was amazing. It really was spectacular. What I didn't understand was how good the brakes were. And you know, and they set the dash up so that I could see speed on it. And so about the fourth or fifth lap, now I'm hammering, you know, I'm cool, I'm out here. And I look down, it's 185 miles an hour, and here comes that number 3 marker. So bam, I stand on it and start gearing down, and by the 2 marker, I'm essentially stopped. So, okay, we'll go a little deeper next time. I finally found out you actually could drive through the 1 marker, the brakes were so good, and gear down and make that little right and then back to the left. And it was just, the only embarrassing thing was that Teo Fabi had taken the car out for laps that day. And they running the telemetry on the steering, the throttle, and the brakes. And so he had the chart of the telemetry about that large. And that was his. Mine was about that large. In other words, I'm a lot slower than he is. But one thing I noticed that was so contrary to what I'd ever been taught was that he didn't ramp up to speeds. I mean, his things were scared off. He knew right where that throttle needed to go each time. And it's just that really impressed me a great deal. Then the next day, we went over to Weishaupt, and they were kind enough. First of all, I got a ride with one of the world rally guys around the 28 mile, and we're locked up at the opposite lock, and he's saying, "Und the Schloss is up there," I think, and the track is right here. So they let us drive all these Porsches. They had them all lined up, and there were about 4 or 5 of us there. Mark Suhr, a Formula One guy, and journalists. So I'm trying them. I'm in the first car. I tried it. I'm having a great time. Oh, this is a good car. These were all just awesome Porsches. And then I get to one, and my friend who drove me around the track, who's kind of monitoring this, looks at me and he goes, and I said, it's broken? No, you don't want to drive that. Why not? I won't tell you what model it is, but he said, because we build that for American doctors and lawyers. Okay, there you go.
Don't ask. Nobody's going to talk.
944.
And now it's out.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm real quick in tying up.
I didn't say that, by the way.
Cut tape. You wind up coming back to the network after having left in 2002.
Right.
And you bring this young man into the fold.
Young, fine young man.
A little bit battered for his experience, but brighter for it, despite the concussions. And tell us a little bit about that era, 2002. You're now at the point where you're still in the middle of the split. It's the Indy Racing League at this point. But tell us about putting those broadcasts together.
Well, the split was horrible, especially since the network decided, since it was auto racing and Indy cars, I could do both series. So the end result is anything I say on one, the other series is all after me, and the reverse of that. There was nothing you could do right. And finally, they were merciful enough to put me on the Indy 500, whatever series was running at that time, and it was IRL at that time. And of course, that's the time when I'm working with that one right there. Is there a microphone could come down here to this young man 3 seats over?
Too late.
Get on. Why don't, it's proper to stand up when you're talking on things like this. People.
I'm not talking.
People want to see you. Now, I'm going to say something, see if you can confirm it, Mr. Goodyear. I happen to enjoy a drink called Tullamore Dew. And I would have it in the evening before the race, to the point that Mr. Goodyear would say, quiet down, right? Mm-hmm. Be careful, okay? But in the booth, and you can verify this, the stage manager at every race, she had a little airline bottle of Tullamore Dew. And as we hit the last segment, and we're about to go off the air, she'd set it up on top of my monitor. So as an incentive to get off the air quickly, which I did. The best trick I ever played on this man, Scott Goodyear does not like to fly commercial. Commercial's beneath him, and I get that. Great racing driver of his caliber and everything. He shouldn't have to ride with all the rest of his peons. So what he would do is he would try to make an arrangement on one of the team jets to get back home, and he was quite successful at it. And it really hacked me off, because I never heard him come around and say, "Hey, Paul, you want to come?" No, I never heard those words. So I went down to Roger Penske, and I explained my problem. And so Roger Penske wrote a letter that essentially said, "Paul, I understand you're having trouble getting home from some of these events, so I'm going to make our G50 available to you at any time at the end of the race. Just arrange it with my people," essentially what it said. Then I take it to the booth, and I lay it kind of catty-cornered up here. And so Scott comes in and sits down, and he's ready to go, and he's looking around, and what the hell? What did you think when I did that, huh? You thought it was BS right off, or did I have you?
No, you had me.
Good.
Yeah. Knowing your friendship with Roger, you had me.
Scott was also a guy who wouldn't let me drive the rental car. And it was good because he'd get me places faster. So
This is where I will add a little bit of a story. Pikes Peak International Raceway. Do you remember that one?
which one?
Pikes Peak?
I do remember that escape. Yes.
Yes, and it was an escape. Okay.
That's all we did, escapes.
An escape. So we are now probably rain delay, and instead of getting out of there at 4 o'clock or something like that, or 5 o'clock, we are now trying to get to Denver to get the very last flight, which is at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night or something like that. By the time we finally got out of the track after all the long delays, we were going along whatever highway it was. I'm always driving. Paul is navigating, which is not very good, and Jenks is in the back seat. And Jenks, for whatever reason, didn't wear a seatbelt a lot, but always had his hands up on the seats behind us and was always leaning forward to chat and everything of that nature. Yeah, so I mean, we just did this all the time. And so we're going along, and it was over 100 because we need to get there, and we were going to get home because Paul says we got to get going. So we're going along. It's a little bit of mist and rain and things like that. And we're coming up to the exit, and the exits on that highway at that time, I mean, the next exit's like 5 miles or 8 miles or something like that. So if you're going to have to get off, you need to get off. And we're going along, and I'm saying, Paul, I think this is the exit. No, it's not the exit. I'm going, Paul, this is the exit. Would you listen to me? This is not the exit. Just keep going. So just as we're about ready to pass the exit and the road starts to veer, it's almost like where the chevrons would be on a racetrack. I hear, oh, shit, you're right. Well, guess what? We still made the exit. So I turned the car right. We might have slid a little bit. We went through the ditch. We came and we landed on the ramp. And Paul's got his map, and God love him for this. I look over at him because we've gone bum, 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 like this. And I look over him, and Paul's still got the map. He's going, yeah, you're right. Didn't even flinch. It was just like he was fine with it. So I hear this groan in the back seat, and I look in the mirror, because I always saw Bob's head, right? And I look in the mirror, and there's no Bob. So I turn around, and I look like that, and he's groaning because he's laying across the floor, because we went up and down. He didn't have a seatbelt on, and he ended up, I go, Bob, let me pull over. I'll help you. He goes, don't stop the car. Just get to the airport. So we continued on. But Paul was a navigator, and yeah, not a very good navigator, but I do remember that one. So that's my only rental car story. No, you're very welcome.
I can't thank you enough for telling them that. Yeah, that's very nice of you. Okay.
Oh, let me tell one more. I got another one.
You've been warned.
Well, we used to get paid to talk, so you know how this works out. Waffle House. There we go.
Deal.
Okay.
This is your deal.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Well, so much so.
He's so cheap. Sorry.
What does that say?
Is the menu for Waffle House?
Yes, absolutely. It's a menu for Waffle House. I love Waffle House for whatever reason. So anyways, I got this as a Christmas present. It's got the menu on here. I was just at a Waffle House with one of my chaps that work for me on the F4F3 program, and so we were sitting there, and the guy goes to give his menus, and he comes back, and he goes to take our order, and I'm looking at this, and he goes, what do you have? I go, oh, it's my menu. And I showed it to the guy, and he was like completely flabbergasted. He didn't know what to do. But anyways, Waffle House. So we were at Richmond.
Yes.
Remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
Late race, night race, and everything like that. A bit of a delay, a rain delay again. So, and we're starving, so we go to leave. And then the warm yellow glow of the Waffle House, I can always see them wherever they are, right? So anyways, I say to Paul, I go, we're going to pull in here. And he looks at me like he always does sometimes and just goes, we don't want to go in here. I go, no, they've got great food and hot coffee 24 hours a day. It's like you really want to go here. So we pull in. There happened to be a guy fixing his car. The hood was up, and he happened to be fixing his car. He happened to have a revolver on the side of his, because, I mean, somebody might come and steal his car. Richmond can have its time. So anyway, we go inside there, and we go to sit down and order, and Paul, he just looks at me and goes, we need to go. I go, no, Paul, you're fine. You're going, I don't think you enjoyed your meal. You really didn't, because you're not really a Waffle House type of guy, but he was very...
I'm a situational awareness type of guy.
Yes. It might have been a little bit sketchy, but I'll stop anywhere for a Waffle House. So I got to him, to get to his very first Waffle House. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure you appreciated it then. I'm not sure you appreciated it now. But
I love the food, the clientele.
Yeah, and the entertainment is always perfect at Waffle House. So there you go. Yeah, Waffle House story.
But wait, just a minute.
I kind of feel like I am Paul between Bobby and Sam.
All right, this is in Virginia, and in one corner there is a meeting of the Black Panthers, and in another corner a meeting of the Ku Klux Klan, and then a bunch of Arab people sitting here. Right? And I said, we're leaving.
We stayed. Food was great.
Yeah, he loves Steak and Shake, so it's a cheap date.
And you remember Todd Harris, who also worked ABC. I introduced Todd Harris to the warm yellow glow, Dallas, Texas. Remember in Dallas, Texas, from the booth, you can look over the track and you can see the warm yellow lights of the Waffle House.
Yeah, we had some kind of fascinating booths throughout our time too.
Oh.
I told you about the forklift with Bobby Unser.
Nazareth.
We were actually in one booth, and I maybe never mentioned this to you, but the booth on top of the Michigan, it's not anchored to anything. Just thought you ought to know that in case a tornado came up.
You did point that out when we walked up to it for the first time, which you could have done without. That was okay.
God, we had a good time together.
Nazareth, Pennsylvania. Remember that booth with the power going out?
Oh,
And then Bob Jenkins being the host and the rain coming down, he was in a tarp because the booth was so small.
right.
And then,
He was actually in between the two booths
yeah.
with a tarp over the top of him.
And I'll tell you a quick story on this with Paul. So we go, and the power went out, and Nazareth, the start of the race, and the producer is telling Paul over the IFB about what is going on the racetrack, and he's making it up for the first 30 or 45 seconds with no pitcher, and making it up before the pitcher came back on, because we went live on air, and the race was about ready to start, and the power had gone down. Okay. And I stood there, and I thought, this is a joke. Okay, these guys are doing something much like you did with Unser and everything like that, but no, it was live. So, I mean, impressive how you did that. I'm not really too sure, but you called it for the probably 30 seconds, 40 seconds before the power came back on. That was pretty impressive.
There's a fun one like that. I may never have told you, but when we raced at Tamiami Park in Miami, Don Ohlmeyer, again, producer, and he's great. This was a bicycle show, which meant like the race is starting at 1, but it doesn't start on the air until 2 or 2:30, something like that. You know, there's an interval. And it was a great race. The whole thing, we got it all down. They've started rolling the front end. It's on the air, but again, Don Ohlmeyer, he's also a perfectionist. And he wanted the last segment of the show, the segment with the finish and the interview and everything, he wanted to keep recutting it so he had it perfect, right? And he's taking time, and it's getting dark now, and everybody else has left the track, and it's just Bobby and I in this booth and our audio people. And we're waiting, and finally Don says, I've waited too long, we're going to have to do it live. Okay, we do that. We do things live, like that, live to tape and voiceover. So that didn't seem like a challenge. Now, the communications lines that I have are actually powered by the truck. So I can talk back and forth to the truck despite what may happen in the booth. And in this particular case, just before we're going to voice this over live, the power fails to the booth. It turns out the generator ran out of fuel. We'd been there so long. Everything goes dark. No monitors, no lights. Bobby Unser is there, standing here with a, what the hell look that he does really well. And so we started, and I'm listening to the laps, and Don saying, turn 2, turn, and you kind of remember the laps as you narrated them to begin with, and then I realized I can tell what corner they're in by hearing the gear shift. So, Don, shut up, and I'm calling, we call it. There's the finish, and it was perfect, if I may say so myself. I mean, we did that entire end of that race. The last segment of about 8 minutes with no monitor whatsoever, and we're in the dark. And Bobby is just standing there like, and at the end it was, how do you do that? So that was a thing. All right, come on, somebody else. Let's
open
get
it
rid
up.
of this kid.
So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. I will come over to you. See one in the back here. Now, everyone needs to hear you.
Hi, I was just curious what you feel having only 33 entries this year. There won't be any bumping that we're normally associated with, and the excitement of who's going to get knocked out, in that last minute on the track. Does that change anything, or is that just reflective of the costs of the teams and what they incur in the
Well,
multiple cars?
If you think about the series, generally we're a 24-car series. And it used to be, I remember when we had 109 cars entry. And some of those weren't race cars, but there was a guy who I'll allow to remain unknown who entered 2 cars. And when you get 2 cars, you get a garage, and they got, I think, like 8 or 10 silver badges because you're an entrant. Those cars were on flat tires. He never intended to take those out. But yeah, we'd have and then we'd have the bumping. But it seems to me that the financial picture has become such that the idea of jumping from your 24 cars to a 33-car field for the 500-mile race is hard to come by because you got a lot of people in there who don't necessarily run cars in the full season, and it's a problem for them. So I think it's mostly a financial problematic, but I also think that we're going to see that get bigger in future years. I was kind of disappointed with this year, and I will remind you that while the qualifying's a little bit different in the way we go into it and then at Fast Friday, it is not uncommon for a car to suddenly show up that nobody knew was there. And we got that a lot when you had a qualifying such that you had a first week and a second week and a third day and all of a sudden you'd see new cars come in because the other car was in the field and everything. Let's try and put another one in. But I like the bumping. I do like what they're doing with the qualifying now because it gives television a specific time to work, and I think it's kind of interesting. Do you? Good. I'm sorry, could you?
He's disappointed because they black out the broadcast so you can't see.
I understand. I also know where the speedway's at. I don't want it to be blacked out. I'm against that. My sense this year is that we'll get right on top of it and suddenly the blackout will be lifted. Now, you also know, and there's some controversy, and I don't know how it's worked out yet, NBC uses their Peacock channel to cover practice and everything, and the argument seems to be that since you subscribe to that, and you subscribe to all of it, that Peacock will not black it out. So, take your choice. I'm going to be at the racetrack.
Yeah, what is race day for Paul? What happens now? What do you do?
Oh, now it's so much easier. I have some law enforcement friends who I get on the back of their little deal and come sliding in, and hope that the guard doesn't think that I'm an extra because, if you've ever been in an escort out there, they bring you into the gate at the south end of the track, and as the escorts go through the different intersections, the escorting motorcycle or car will put up their hand, we've got 15 cars behind us, something like that. So by the time you actually get to that entrance and people have tagged on to the escort, they end up pulling up thinking, I'm going to turn in here, and then that cop says, nope, straight on, which takes them all the way back out to 465. I do it legitimately, And I go to the garage area first, and I wander around, say hello to all my friends, and I don't believe in wishing a race driver luck. I just wish them to stay safe. And then I will go up to the broadcast booth itself and kind of make sure that all the guys are there, because I'll be on radio. I'm the old fart in the back of the booth is what I am. I do the strategy and the tactics. And there's a side story to that I'll tell you. But so I'll make sure everything's copacetic there. And then I will go to the media center and see whatever last things are coming out, though I generally don't use press releases. And then I head down to the track, and as the cars are already out there by the time I get down, the ceremonies have generally started, and I've got this super pass that allows me to be down there on the starting field, and I then go by and, thumbs up to a couple of my really good friend drivers. My son, Brian, is the chief performance engineer for Andretti, and he's on Colton Herta's car. If you saw the race yesterday, and unfortunately, part of his job is doing fuel strategy, so you can imagine what it was like figuring out that race yesterday. Which leads me to the other, being the tactics guy. At the 100th race, I'm watching how it unfolds, and I know my kid pretty good, and he takes chances, and he can really calculate fuel and other aspects of the race. And I suddenly realize where Rossi is and what they're doing. He's running slow, he's saving fuel. And so I say to the broadcast guys, the team, Mark Janes and Davey Hamilton, I say, we got to keep an eye on Rossi. I mean, they're pulling something. He's ninth, he can't do anything. So I did that in a commercial. So kind of wanting to keep up my bona fides, I finally get on the air and I say, we have to keep an eye on Rossi because he has a very good chance of winning this race. And again, Paul, go back in the corner. And of course, what happened was, he was saving fuel. He went from 9th to 1st. He ran out of fuel in the middle of the backstretch, and my son had predicted that, but they were doing everything they can to keep the car rolling. He crossed the finish line at a blistering 135 miles an hour, but all the team was doing, and my son, who he tenses up, I could just see him because they're calculating now on those last laps the distance between Rossi and Munoz, because Munoz running over 200 miles an hour while Rossi's doing nothing, and they just keep looking at the seconds, as they're coming through, and it's like, oh man, this is going to be close, and it was. But that's kind of what I do, is try to keep track of the overall tactics and strategy, and then I wander down after it's over and celebrate with everybody else.
Drinking the ambiance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pete, any other
We got
questions?
another one.
Paul, you used to actually do 2 broadcasts for the 500. You did the live broadcast, and then after everything is settled down, you would go into the truck and do the tape delay that was shown locally on Channel 13.
No.
How was that done, or was?
I believe that Channel 13 got the full race. Sometimes they would not use some of the pre-race. Sometimes, a couple times, I think I saw them pick it up at 10:30 for an 11 o'clock start when there's stuff earlier than that that we do. But we don't touch it. Once it's left us, it's out there. Right, exactly. In the race itself, nobody messes with that. They're not allowed to, actually.
Got one more back here.
With all the races that you have seen and experienced, is there one that stands out, or maybe a specific car that stands out where you say, wow, that really got me excited?
Yeah. First, let me say that with regard to the Indy 500, the one thing that has always amazed me is no two of them are the same. Every 500-mile race has some little twist that is different. And part of that is we're going to go 300 miles further in a week, 2 weeks, than any other race on the circuit. So there's a lot of unknowns out there. So races that I really have enjoyed, one, I enjoyed yesterday's race at the Grand Prix immensely. I thought it was so cool. Of course, down my alley that I really like tactics and, you know, what everybody's trying to do, what their fuel strategies are. And I did enjoy it at the end of the race when the interviews were coming in and the guys were saying, they'd say, well, what was your strategy? And they say, no idea. None of us had any idea. And I think they pretty much didn't. Last year's Indy 500, my favorite, 500 for years was the first one I ever attended, 1960, which was Rathman and Ward, and they were changing the lead at every corner. And it was just, you know, kids' first race, watching this, and I love the Roadsters. I still miss the Roadsters. They were so beautiful, you know. Yeah. When you got a guy up in the cockpit and you can see him, you know, fighting the wheel and everything, is a little different. So I love the 60 race until last year. And I thought last year's Indy 500, especially in the closing laps and the finish, was pretty spectacular. Plus, Elio and I are pretty close, and to see him take that win and then not run around. We and I, as friends, we kind of have a tradition that I don't know how you'd call it because it's not planned, but I'll go down to the winner's circle as soon as the race is over. They don't need me in the booth anymore. And every year that Elio's won, he's come over and he's given me a hug. And a couple of them had pictures taken. This last year, it was so different, so exciting, and you know, so many other things going on. I kind of waited around, and it took forever to get the photographs and get him down off the winner's platform. And so I see him come down, and I kind of start toward him, and he had two really large security guys with him, who kind of started toward me. And then Elio sitting there, and he still got the wreath on and everything. And we hugged, and we just jumped up and down. It was special. He's a special friend.
You had one?
Paul, question. As exciting and colorful as the 500 has been over the years, there's also been a lot of tragedy. How do you pick up and know what to say at that moment?
I picked up something from Sid. First, let me tell you about Sid and 1964, the Saks McDonald, for which Sid has been constantly praised for his ability to deliver that particular eulogy. And he should be. It was an amazing piece of oration. But he had almost 2 hours to figure that out. Now, how did he do that? What got the thoughts to put them together? Well, he had, in past years, had in-race fatalities and just kind of dispatched them with so-and-so was fatally injured in the accident on the back straightaway kind of thing. Pat O'Connor, Bill Vukovich. So he started really paying attention to that, and he had an envelope in which he had some prose, some poetry, just stuff relating to passing. And so the Death Has 1,000 Doors eulogy that he gave, he had 2 hours to mess around that. One, in the booth, you know right away. You've got lines that tell you, this is a fatality, or whatever. There's actually a code that we use between the trucks on the track and the rest of us, so we know what's going on there. So I learned from him to have something, just to look at if I needed it, to glance at, to remind me. I always also look through that the night before the race, just to remind me what's in there. I had to call too damn many fatalities. The worst being Greg Moore. In-race fatality. I knew it the minute I saw the accident that was a fatality. But the process with the officials is they got to wait until usually the wife or something is there at the track, so that is pretty well expedited. In this case, it wasn't. And in this case also, for some reason, the PR people got involved, and they came to the booth, one of the officials, and said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go yellow, and we're going to lower the flags to half-staff, and then the PA is going to make the announcement about Greg Moore. Jesus. You know, this is not a show. This is pretty serious stuff. This young man is dead, and he's a superhuman being. So, a little later, they go yellow. Flags come down, then they go back up, and they go green. They had no idea what they were doing. So when we were finally cleared, and actually Dr. Steve Alvey at the track hospital decided to hell with what IndyCar's got planned and just said, let's go with it. But I've had more than my share, including one in drag racing. And part of the problem for me is this is my community. You know, it's what I do for a living, but I also live in that community, and we're friends. And my son was one of Greg Weldon's, or Dan Weldon's people, and it shattered him. It was his first crossing with death. And now he will not make friends with any drivers. And that's not an uncommon situation, but it's because you're talking about your own people, and you know, you see them. That morning I was down in the pits playing around with Greg, and he was showing me where the little brace they made for the motorcycle crash that he had, and he was in good spirits, and he had his life ahead of him. He was going to go to Penske. God knows where he would have been now if he had lived, and you know, that pours all over you, and it just breaks your heart.
And if I recall correctly, you were the one who called the booth after the accident and said no replays.
Yes, right. As soon as I saw that, I hit that button and I said to the producer's truck, no replays. And they didn't, but unfortunately there were enough idiots that recorded it on their home recorders and put it all over the internet, and that still pisses me off, pardon my expression.
Yep.
So obviously you said you and Helio have really tight connection. You guys are we're all bonded. The question is going back to the years of the IRL versus kart split. So having you working during kart during that time, who actually, in your mind or in your vision, won the 2002 Indy 500?
Won the
2002.
Paul Tracy or Elio?
Paul Tracy or Helio?
No, I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
it's an uncomfortable question because you just really, you said so many good things about Helio, and Helio's a phenomenal driver. But
let me tell you what I know first. I know it was our communications direct with the officials was just crazy. I mean, you had a split situation. You had the accident happening coming off of 2, and them going for it in 4. And we had always followed that the last passing of a timing line, or the start-finish line in this case, if you had that kind of thing happen, then you'd revert to that line. Well, that wasn't the way they were doing it. And they told us 2 or 3 ways that they were doing it on the direct line connection. We're like, the hell? Because they said that anytime there's an accident, you freeze the field where they are and go yellow. Well, how do you do that? How do you take that giant field and decide you're going to freeze all those cars in that one position? And then one of our cameramen came up with a shot of turn 3 in which it looked like there was a yellow light on, and it looked like that might affect it. Then we realized it's actually just one of the yellow shirts who turned into the sun. Now, here I am. I love Helio and I love PT. And here's what I think. Don't tell Helio. I think that PT won that race. And I'll tell you where I draw that from. again, I mentioned my son. They did a survey of from turn 2 all the way through the short chute in the north end. And in that survey, they indicated where all the different landmarks were and, smudges on the track and stuff like that. And then they were able to account for every frame, starting with the entry to turn 3. And then on this big chart they did, there's also a bunch of lines at each frame that tell you where that data came from. In some cases, it came from a Penske car or from an official or a timeline, but they account for all the data. I think that Tracy had the lead when the yellow came out. I think it looked strange because of the way they jumped out of the throttle and juxtapositioned the cars at that. And we didn't have the angles to show it well. But just from the data collection and everything, I thought it was Tracy. Now, they did all of that. They brought it to appeal with Tony George, and he said, I'm not looking at any of that, it is what it is. So.
You cited like the 81 finish, the Bobby Unser Mario Andretti thing as a possible reason
Another
why
fun day.
We're not going to change horses in midstream, right?
Well, I called that race as super. Thought it was a good race. Next morning, I'm driving for the morning picture with the winner, and on the signage there at the motel, it says, "Congratulations, Mario Andretti," and I'm like, geez, did I screw up that bad? And I truly believe that ABC caused that. I wasn't with ABC at that time, but Jackie Stewart started into this thing talking about the blend line. Hell, at the time, Scott, did we know what the blend line was back then? It had never been called on us. And that whole thing, ABC took it to Tom Binford, the chief steward, while they were auditing the race into the evening. And now he got into it, and he got all worried about it, and they decided, oh, okay, Bobby did in fact pass cars coming up on the blend line. All right. And then 6 months later, we find out who won the race, which was Bobby. In fact, Bobby, I was working at Channel 13 at that time, and Bobby'd come down the station every night because Channel 13 had different camera positions. And we'd look through the positions, and we're up late into the night, the two of us looking at all these different tapes. And there was this really, really good moment. He said, "Paul, I didn't know that was a rule. Because if I knew it, I never would have done it." And I think, big mistake, Bobby. So that's, the outcome of that one too. And when you start to do an audit on the scoring, both of them did it. So whatever.
There's an old Chinese curse that says, "May you live in interesting times," and you have lived through a lot of interesting
I've
times.
been so lucky.
Yes. There's one of your quotes in the book where you say, "Everyone knows my memory is terrible," and you wouldn't be able to tell that from tonight. So thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Wait a minute. You have to read him the first line of Mario's dedication.
Yeah, this is, Paul has such great stories, he ought to write a book, and it turns out he did. And it is available on Amazon and through your better booksellers. But I'll leave this to you because I think you know immediately. First.
Well, I can tell you.
Yeah.
I got this one down. I asked Mario, Roger wrote a really nice thing for the cover. I asked Mario to do the introduction.
Yeah.
And the first sentence that he writes is, "Paul Page is no rat." The publisher saw that and said, "You can't, that cannot be in the book." I said, "You got to be kidding me. That's one of the greatest compliments Mario's ever given me." And what he did lead to was that I could be trusted with the secrets. And, you know, a lot of times a team would say, we're trying this, or we're going to do this, or this is our plan, but you can't say anything about it unless it works out. So I got a lot of information, and I think everybody understood that I wouldn't violate the trust. I'm a journalist. That's not what we do, except with him. I told
Well, that's
all his stuff.
That's a given, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's just, it's a terrific read. So if you're so inclined and if you're a fan of the 500, there is a lot of great background on the race itself, on Paul's career, and how the two converge. Entirely worth it. So again, Paul, thank you for sharing the night. Thank the CIRPCA and SONAX for putting all this together, and I'm very fortunate to have this opportunity.
The book, by the way, Amazon sold out. Barnes & Noble's online still has the book if you're
Go
so
get 'em.
inclined. If you go to Amazon, though, you can buy one for $150.
Woo!
I don't get any of it, but go for it.
It's a collectible, so thank you all. I appreciate it. Oh, yes.
1 second.
One more thing, and this is actually, it was a surprise to me, and it ought to be a surprise to you.
Okay.
That the mayor of Westfield has declared today, May 15th, to be Paul Page Night here in Westfield. It should, yeah. Just tack it to the windshield.
Well, I think we all ought to get together at the local bar. Mayor wants us all to have drinks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, that's amazing.